Hello friends, welcome back. This is full stack development video series. We're building the online course enrollment application. This is episode 5. Alright, so the goal of this video is to get to know how you will build the first set of get endpoints for course and course category, and we will be talking to the database using the entity framework core and a lot of tips. So without delay, come let's get started. Alright, so I have opened up the project, and the first thing that we have to do is to clean up all of those mess that we had in the last episode. So I'm going to clean up all of those classes and all the default controllers and models that we don't want. So let's do it. I deleted all of those things. So let's start fresh, right? So first thing is you need to first create a repository. So in order for us to proceed with endpoint, you'll be talking to the controller, servers, and the infrastructure, the data layer. So let's first create the methods and other things available in the infrastructure. So I'm going to create an interface called CourseCategory repository. So we will always come from back repository first, we will finish, followed by the servers, and then only we will have the controller code coming into picture. Okay, now the repository, I'm going to add a method called get by id, and the return type is the course category. So these two methods, okay, so I have two methods. One is returning one course category and then list of course category. So first we need to implement this. So whenever you have an interface, you need to first implement this. So implementation class should be the similar name, like except the I. So it's going to be a public class name, followed by you will inherit the interface that will force you to implement the methods. So the moment it comes, control period, and then you can select the options, it will implement this kind of a code, right? It's basically refactoring it. Now in order to bring the constructor, ctor, put a tab, it will give you constructor. Here we need to inject the db context, online course db context. The one that you saw is called primary constructor. Okay, so in .NET 8 you can write it in primary constructor. So I made a dependency injection for the constructor, so for good. Now in this, what we are going to do is we are first going to see how the synchronized method is going to work, and later I will quickly tell you how we will start using everything as asynchronous method. Now let's recap. Whatever you saw is the primary constructor, that's why it is like this, and it's available from .NET 8. Now if you say db context dot, all of the tables will start appearing, and we are dealing with the course category table. So course category dot find means it's a synchronous method. If you pass an id, it will go and look for the primary key on that table. So in this case, if you pass number like 2, it will go to the table and look for where id is equal to 2, like category id is equal to 2. That's what it is going to do. Okay, now we got the data, and it is basically saying, hey, you're passing an id, you may or may not find the data, that's why it is nullable, right? So that's why the data is showing as green color down on line number 19. So basically, we don't know until the query is executed, the particular id is present or not. That's what it is doing. So remember, find is a synchronous method. If you pass a number, that is equivalent of going and finding a record based on the primary key. Okay, this is something that you should remember, and this is based on the entity framework code. Okay, now what we can do is we can go to this interface and make this as optional, like nullable. If you put a question mark, that becomes a nullable. Now there it is nullable, so we will change the signature here. See, the error went off. Okay, so that's what basically this means. So the reason I'm showing all of these things is for you to understand some fundamentals, how nullable and not nullable is working. Okay, so that is what it means. Okay, so if I pass a number and it is not present, it will return a null. The moment you see a question mark, this method can return null also. Now similarly, if you wanted to get all the records from that particular table, db context dot that table name dot to list. To list means it will literally take everything and convert as a list. Okay, and it is returning a list of course category. Now whatever you're seeing is all synchronous method. I really don't like synchronous methods, so we are going to learn about the asynchronous methods. How can we do this? Let's comment this out, and I'll teach you easily how asynchronous methods are used. Okay, so while I'm going to do that, I will also tell you there are good videos that I've made on async await and C# and .NET. I'm gonna give you that in this link. You can take a look at this link or in the description. So I will quickly go through how you will implement in this .NET Core Web API. Okay, so let's go to this interface and I'm going to comment this out. Okay, so I'm going to keep all of this commented code only for your reference. We're not going to use it. So I'm going to comment this out and I'm going to change this into asynchronous, and from then everything is going to be asynchronous. Okay, so public interface, that interface name. So I'm going to change the name. Okay, it really doesn't matter. So basically the name, the reason why I changed this, any asynchronous method will always end with a word called async, because that tells the user, or it's a standard, basically tells that this method is asynchronous method. And one more condition, it should always return a task of t type. Okay, so here if you look at this task of course category, task of list of course category, so everything is surrounded by a task. Okay, so task, all of those things detailedly I've explained in this async await video. Please don't forget to watch that video. And just to speed up this process, I'm going to at a high level explain what is async await, how you can use it. Now let's implement the implementation class for this course category interface, right? So what we are going to do is same thing. We have the class, the repository class course category, and if you remember the previous one, I showed you how primary constructor comes, and this time I'll show you a regular constructor. Okay, just to give you a different flavors, whichever you want to use you can use, but primary constructor is only available from .NET 8. All right, so if you look at this, see I'm putting control period and it is asking me should be a field or property or a primary constructor. See, I made it as a field this time. Okay, both are same. It's really not different. Now coming back to the first one, every time every method will have synchronous and asynchronous. You see this, instead of find async, rest and all is going to be same. But if you look at, I'll hover it and show you. So what will happen is when you do a find async, it is also going to return a task of t type. So we'll convert this as task, and if you hover on the data, it will show you task of course category. Okay, so that's what the asynchronous methods will do. Now remember one thing, as long as you don't need the data immediately, you don't need to use a word called async, okay, or await. Async await you don't need to use in this method signature whenever you don't want the data immediately. The moment you use async await, immediately the data will be retrieved and the calls will be suspended there itself. Okay, so I will show you an example in the upcoming repository, but for this time we don't need it, so we are returning a task of course category itself. Similarly for find like toolist, toolist async is there, and toolist async doesn't need any of these things. It is already returning a task of list of course category. Great, so these two methods are done, and this is all coming from Microsoft.Entity Framework code. Okay, so for good, so we built the repository. Now what we are going to do is we need to call these methods from the services. So we need to create the services here. So we need to create a services here. I'm going to create a course category services interface as well as course category service implementation method. Now here is the thing, service is meant for writing business logic, which means our application may or may not have like very heavy business logic. Maybe in the upcoming thing I will put it, but for simple things there is no business logic. And one more thing you have to remember, we should never ever send any of the entity classes directly to the customer, meaning to the endpoint. Your entity class, which is a table definition class sitting inside the core, should never be exposed directly in the controller as the model. Remember this. Okay, so we are going to build some models, and that model is what is exposed in the outside. So what does it mean? What is the difference between these two? Basically entity class will have a lot of properties, but customer may or may not be interested with all the properties. So we will limit only certain things showing up. I'll give an example. So for the course category, okay, first let's create a models a folder under the core, because the core project is common, right? That's why I'm putting this model here. Okay, so I'm gonna create this is also called view model kind of thing. Okay, so we are going to create a model. Just to differentiate, I'm giving a name called course category model. Okay, here if you look at this, see it has I collection of course. We don't need to expose that. Instead, we will expose only the properties that we are interested to send. The UI is expecting only the category ID, name and description, doesn't really expect anything else, right? So we are not supposed to expose. See, imagine in the real world, in real application, tables are very huge. A lot of properties will be there. Okay, our application is straightforward, so you don't see like that, but there will be a lot of properties. We should never send it. Okay, so that's why we are creating this. So we know now why we have to create this, which kind of classes we have to export it, I mean like expose to the customer. Great, so we have created this course category model. Okay, property seems to be same, but don't worry about it. Now I'm going to copy paste the method signature. So task of course category model, this time I'm returning a different model, not the model which is coming from the repository. The names are same, but the return type is different here. Okay, so now remember one more thing. I might create the classes in same file. Generally speaking, in production ready application, interface should be in a separate class, like separate file. Implementation should be in a separate file. Okay, so just for our understanding, I'm doing it here, but when you do by yourself, please create a separate file, at least in your project. Okay, if not in the learning phase, it's okay. Now I will inherit this class, and then control period will refactor and implement all the definitions. We got those two methods. Here in the constructor, we need to inject the instance of the repository. You remember, we need to call the repository, so we need to inject the repository here. So course, see, it's not coming, right? So what is missing? Let's go. Let's fix whatever we did mistake. If you go to service, it's only having dependency on the core project, whereas it needs to have a dependency on the data project also. Let's verify the data. Data doesn't have anything. That's good. Data doesn't call anything. It just calls the core. Okay, so far good. Now let's try to inject the repository. Now it's coming. Course category repository is coming. Give it a name, control period. It will give you this kind of option. Choose the third one, field, property, anything is fine. And you have that. Then we will use this category repository dot get id async. But see, I cannot return this. Why? The return type is of core.entity.model. The return that we are doing is different, so we cannot do it. Here you need data, right? This is the place you need data in order to do something. This is where the async await comes into picture, because as I said, async await is the keyword that we will be using in order to wait for the data. The moment compiler says here, okay, I'm going to write the async await, give me a second. The calls will be suspended, the compiler knows what to do, all of those things. So simple asynchronous implementation is very simple. If you see a method with async keyword, like async as the method name, okay, put an await keyword there in front of the method, and in the signature you need to use something called async. So I'm going to comment here itself so that you know what we're doing. So when we need data, I'm going to repeat. So right, whenever we need data, we need to use await keyword in front of the calling method, and whenever await keyword is there, you need to use async keyword in this method signature. See, async await. Compiler knows what to do. This becomes a asynchronous method, right? So now we got the data. We need to now return a different types of model, right? The data that we got on line number 35 is course category. That is from entity. What we have to return is course category model. Okay, so that's the difference. So now you use this keyword, we got the data. Okay, so now we will say we can directly say return new course category model, like the return type, and then we reassign the properties. See, category ID is equal to data.category ID. Now if you do keep tabbing, right, Visual Studio Code, the Visual Studio itself is bringing up all of these features. So it knows what is the property and it is bringing up all of this data. See, now what we're doing, data is showing us like the error, we will change it. But here also same, right? We're converting this to async await. So here what we will do, same thing, we will wait for the data. The data is equal to the category repository dot get categories async. This method will return a list of that model. We will await for the model and then we will return the list. Okay, so it's going to be same. So what we can do is data dot select. See, dot select doesn't link your extension method for this kind of a class. So you can use dot select and then specify new course model. You map this and then dot to list. So if 10 data is coming, link you will take care of converting into 10 list of an array, and then it will return the total list, like it will return the list. Okay, it's as simple as that. You can assign this to some variable like this, right? And then you can return model data. So this will return list of a course category model. Okay, great. Now, though it is returning data, this is still an asynchronous method. Okay, because the method is having task of return type. Now, before we do anything, right, what we have to do is we need to first configure these two as a dependency injection. Go to the program.cs. Okay, go to program.cs and then here you need to configure these services. One service is for the repository, one is for the services. Now when you configure service, like instance of services, 3 type, I'll explain you. So builder.service.add scope. Add scope is one type, add transient, add singleton. I'll explain you the difference. This is one of the interview questions. Add scope means when a request is hit, till the request is completely processed and returned, only one instance of a requested class will be given. Transient means when the request comes, if a same type of interface has been like injected so many places, different instance will be given. Singleton means only one time for the whole application. So do not use singleton, do not use transient unless it is required. We will always use add scoped. This is the perfect configuration for the services. So we're going to use the add scope. Like I said, the transient, singleton, you see, singleton and scoped is there. So we're converting these two into scope. Now next thing is adding a controller. Click on controller, click on API controller, give it a name. Okay, so when you give it a name for the controller, here in our case it's course category. So I'm going to give course category controller.cs. That's the file name. Okay, the controller name is course category. Great. So by default it is creating, this is called route. So if it is prefixing API/controller name, here remember controller name is just course category. So our endpoints will look like API/course category/something. That something is nothing but the method name, the action method name. Okay, and then remember a class that is inheriting a controller base will become a controller. So this is a controller. So we again inject a constructor. In here you need to invoke the service, because controller is calling service is calling repository. That's why we have to come in the reverse order. Same thing, you can use primary constructor, you can use the field constructor. The dependency is done. Now the next thing is, let's get started with what is web API, microservices, difference between these two, and what are the important HTTP status code. When I go through this video, please, I will also cover important interview topics. I myself an interviewer, so I know how to ask, I know how to evaluate the candidates. So at that point of time, right, based on how candidates are responding, we can easily judge, okay, fine, he or she is sufficient enough, they can pick it up, they're good, they know some knowledge. So be patient, I will explain you important thing as we go. And so what is web API? Web API is a set of protocols and tools for building software applications. It allows different software systems to communicate with each other over the web. Web API exposes endpoint that can be accessed via HTTP methods. There are these 4 important HTTP methods. So let me explain. So this is just a definition, right? So Web API is basically, you split this Web API. Web API. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and we're dealing this with the web application, so that's why it's called Web API. So in short, for you guys to understand what is Web API is, basically Web API is nothing but a functionality that is written in the server side. Like you ask for it, it does something and give you some response. So you send a request, it is going to give you a response. The response is always going to be, most of the time it's going to be in the JSON format. And very important thing, Web API deals only with the data. It doesn't return any HTML or anything. They deal with the data. It's a lightweight thing. All right, so that's the at a high level of what is APIs stands for. So when we talk about it's a tool building for software application. Basically, you know, you will have some application like your mobile. Everybody these days have mobile applications. You know, you have mobiles that has a lot of applications, right? It talks to the backend without you knowing it. It exchanges the data, and then the data is what you see on your app. So for example, the primary purpose of the Web API is to enable the interaction between the disparate systems. For example, a client application, right? You could be our UI application, which is in React, Angular, or any mobile application or anything. Client application means a application which is facing the customer. Okay, they can interact with the server to perform certain read and write operations. It's called CORD operation, and that is what this Web API is. So what are the components? Components, there are a couple of things. Endpoints means basically a direct URL that is unique across the web, and that URL, right, it's where your resource is present. So for example, if you want to get some product, it's going to be some domain name, for example, learn smartcoding.com/API/products. If you access this URL, you're going to get some data. Okay, whether the data is protected or not, don't get into it now. Basically an API which will have a unique URL. If you access it, you're gonna exchange the data. And there are a couple of methods that can be used in terms of Web API. They're called HTTP methods. Okay, and like get, post, put, delete, those things. Now important thing you should also understand is Web API deals with the protocol called HTTP and HTTPS. The preferred way of doing is HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secured. SSL layer will be included, which means the data when transfers from your place to the server to this place, like the back to the client, the data is actually encrypted. Nobody can tamper the data in the middle of the network. That's what is important. So Web APIs are always dealing with this HTTP HTTPS protocol. They're secured and they can be accessed via internet globally across the world. Anywhere you are in the world, you can still access that over the HTTPS in the browser or wherever the mechanism is. The next thing is request and response. We already spoke about it. You send a request, you're gonna get the response, and the response, generally speaking, it will be in the JSON format. If at all clients wants an XML format, it can send an extra header to the request. Hey, give me in the XML format. Our web APIs are clever enough to convert it into XML format, right? So that's also possible. So that is what called Web API. Okay, so in a typical web application, right, like we already saw in my channel, a big one called e-commerce application. There'll be several endpoints to deal with products, orders, users, cart, this, that, so many things. They're all just an example. Each one of those things are called functionalities. Now let's talk about microservices. Okay, so people get confused with microservices and Web API. I know for sure a lot of people get confused, right? They think both are same. Microservices nothing but their architectural design patterns, right? They are called architecture. So basically a microservice is a small independent service that does one thing well. It's a part of a large architecture where multiple microservices work together to form a complete system. Let me give an example. Consider the e-commerce application. If a company A builds an e-commerce application, let's say for themselves, right? They build a small e-commerce application for themselves where there's only one project. They build every single thing in one project. Now the project is very big, being big, like it could have reporting, address, orders, products, cart, wish list, this, that, so many things in one single place. If that business gets grown, that application will be deployed several instances in the computer, which means you're just duplicating every single pieces of code into multiple places. Consider this, right? If when you go to Amazon.com or Flipkart or whatever, wherever you belong to, right? If you go to Amazon is the best example. You go to Amazon.com, what do you do? What do we do? We go browse the product. We go inside the product and see the product. How frequently you're gonna order the items? How frequently you're going to go to the address and change your address? The frequency of these things compared to product search or product related stuff are less, right? Which means only the product thing, it's needed more attention, more load. So microservice, what it will do is, what we will do in terms of microservices, we split this big application into chunk of small independent application. If you remember, in our e-commerce application we have 4 different microservices, right? Product, orders, wish and cart separately, users separately, user profile separately. Why? Product is a microservice that does all product related work. Similarly, orders, address and other. So when we bring this to the production, based on the workload, we can scale up that individual component to more instance. For example, if a lot of people are using product API is what needs to be scaled up. When we say scale up, instead of one instance, multiple instances they will deploy, so load can be evenly spread and it can be handled. Whereas address change and all is comparatively less. People will be calling those kind of APIs very less. Not everybody is going to change address every single time. So that's the concept, right? We split the big application into small chunks that becomes an independent services. Okay, so that's called microservice. So if somebody asks you, do you know microservice? Yes, you should be knowing. After this video you should know what is microservice. All right, and somebody knows ask you about web API, you should know what is web API, that which we are going to build now. So whatever I explained is what is in the scope, basically breaking down the application into smaller loosely coupled services, and each services will become its own microservices, like microservice. If you split, micro means small, services means basically it's going to serve something. So that's what it is. Okay, so that's the scope of the microservice. Example, I already discussed all of these things. This is what the examples that we just discussed. E-commerce is the best example that we can talk. And let's summarize. So a web API is a mean of communication over the web, while a microservice is an architectural style that involves building small independent services that often communicate via APIs. This is important, guys. If you say you're a backend developer and you know web API, you should definitely know what really a web API is, what is microservices are. Okay, they will definitely ask you. Maybe we will talk more about a separate video in this interview related stuff. Please let me know in the comment section if you're really interested in the interview stuff. I can help you guys. HTTP status code. So I'm going to be really quick about this HTTP status code. It's always good to understand some at a high level of what of these things, so that when we get into the real hands-on coding, it will be easy for you guys to understand it. Okay, so HTTP status code, HTTP already we know that's a protocol, and it is giving us a standard status code which is already defined. So what it says, HTTP status codes are standardized codes which has already been predefined, written by the web server to indicate the result of a client request. They are grouped into 5 categories. Okay, so you send a request, the client is sending a request to the server is responding to the client. When it responds, it will always have one meaningful HTTP status code. What kind of status codes it is returning is what we are going to learn now. 5 categories. This starts with 1x, 2x, 3, 4, 5. When I say xx, it's going to be like 100. 100 and above within 200, 200 and above, 300 and above, 400 and above, 500 and above. What you need to know is, you should first know just at a high level what are these things. That's it. You don't need to memorize every single status code. One related status codes are all information, which means you have nothing to do with it. It's just FYI, right? For your information, something like that. 200 latest status codes are called successful status code. The server is responding to the client that you gave me a request, I processed it successfully. What kind of success varies based on the different status code. We'll talk through it, don't worry. 3 is all redirection, which means there is some action required from the client side. Today there will be some URL. Okay, down the line after 5 years, for some valid reason, the URL got changed. The server can now respond, hey, this was the URL that you hit, but we changed this URL to this. Please go to this URL. Okay, that's a typical scenario. 400 is all important thing. Say 400 and above, right? They're called client errors, which means client sent a request to the server. Server is saying, hey, I received your request, but there's something wrong in your request, which means any 400 related error can be corrected by the client and can be resubmitted to make this successful. That alone you remember. Okay, 500 means client have nothing to do about it. There is something seriously wrong at the server side, and we are just saying that something went wrong in the server side. Could be anything, depending on the status code. We can tell you what it is, but client cannot do anything. Okay, that's called 500. So let's quickly go through these things. I'm going to walk you through only important things. So 100 is just informational. So let's talk about this 200, right? When you save some content, when I say newly save a content in the using web API, you should always use 201, which is called created. Okay, when you are processing a GET request, which means you're sending back the data, you use 200 OK request. 202, 204 are important as well. Not everybody uses properly. 202 means I received the request, I verified it, it's ready for processing, which means you're just responding to the client saying accepted, your request is accepted. That's it. Whether the request was successfully processed or not, God knows. That's a different story, but we are just telling there are different scenarios why you need to send those things. Okay, similarly 204, which means for delete and all, right? When you process the request, everything is done successful, and we are just saying there is nothing else for me to return it. Let's say you're trying to delete a record, you deleted it. Now what else you will return in that scenario? You deleted the record itself. You cannot return anything. Okay, that's where you use 204 no content. Okay, the next one, the 300 related things, they're all like I explained you, they're all redirection related stuff. And then 400 is what we will go through it. 400 means bad request. If you're submitting a form where age, name, address is all there, and then you forgot to mention the zip code in the address. Now the server is saying, hey, I received all of your requests, zip code is missing, which means incorrect or incomplete request, data in the body is incorrect. Then it will send back saying 400, hey, please fill up the zip code. That's also important. That's also mandatory. That's where the client will recognize, okay, intelligently recognize, okay, this is what the request is, we need to fill up. They can resubmit successful. Similarly, 404 means you're trying to find a a resource which is not present, you send 404 not found. Okay, important status code, all of these things you remember, they are definitely going to be asked in the interviews, especially 400, 401, 403, 404. They are like super important. You should know what are those things. So we know 400, we know 404. Talk about 401 and 403. If server and clients, if server is like protected, if server detects that anonymous requests are coming, it will reject with 401, not authorized. It doesn't have header, it doesn't know who you are, so it doesn't really care about processing, so it will reject with 401. However, if you send with the proper credentials, everything is looking good, if server recognizes who you are, but you're trying to do some action which you're not permitted to do, that's where it sends forbidden. Forbidden means server understands who you are, but it refuses to do so because you're trying to delete some record or update some record which you're not authorized to do according to your role. That's where you see 403. So they're all important, right? The next thing is 500. Everybody knows in this world 500 is basically okay. So before we go to 500, let's one more thing. 409, not frequently used, but good to know. 409 is basically when a particular record is being trying to update with multiple people in support team or whatever it is, right? Real timely, same record is getting updated at the same time. If the server is detecting such kind of thing, if the server detects, it can return 409 saying, hey, conflict, somebody else is also trying to update it, right? Those kind of thing. Last but not least, 500 series. Find is something that we didn't handle the exceptions properly, something really screwed up, exception occurred, that's where you send 500. Okay, 502, 503, 504 are also common. If the servers are not accessible for a different reason, you send this 502, 503, 504 automatically. Okay, you don't need to do when you deploy a particular URL and you get into any of these 502, 503, 504 scenarios, automatically you'll get it from the web server itself. That's beauty. Okay, we don't hard code and send anything like 502. All right, so now you have some understanding of all of these concepts. So let's get into building up the endpoints in our application. So the very first one that we're going to build is the get endpoint. So we know what is get endpoint. All right, so public I action result and then followed by the method name get of ID. Okay, so which means it's expecting an ID. The moment you mark this method as http get, like you have to open the bracket and then say http get, this method becomes an http get method, and you can pass you can define something like this, which will means it will automatically convert as a route ID. So route means like you need to send ID in the route. Okay, now you can use this service, the category service dot get by ID async, and if you say dot wait, basically you're converting the synchronous method, asynchronous method into synchronous method, but we are not going to do that. Okay, so await, wait, we should not use it here. That's a method that is used for asynchronous stuff. If you put dot result, you're converting the asynchronous method into synchronous method. That is also absolutely wrong. Okay, so now any asynchronous method you can use dot result, which means you're forcing the compiler to make this a synchronous method. Never do that. Okay, don't do that unless it is really required. We have to use asynchronous from start to end. We're going to convert this controller method into a asynchronous method. This is all crap. Let's scrap this out, right? So where category is equal to this method name, instead of result, you just leave it and start using async await. This is asynchronous method I teached you already. You just need to put async and await, and return type should be always task of the T type. So here task of I action result. Now for HTTP method, get method, you have to return OK, which is the category. OK means it will return HTTP status code 200. Okay, so 200 is a valid status code where the data has been sent. But what if the ID that you received doesn't have data in the record, like it doesn't have records in the database? What happens to that? Like you cannot send null as OK, right? Which means you need to send a different status code. Remember 404 file, like not found. A resource is not found in the table in the requested data. That's why we need to check this as null and return not found result. Not found will eventually return a status code called 404. This is also important to know. You should always return the correct status code, only then the UI, the client application, can figure out what's going on. Okay, next, another method. This time we're going to return a list of course category. So we will name this as get all. Here just a get, HTTP get, there is no route parameters, and then you're calling the same method like get course categories. It will return just OK off. Think of this table doesn't have any record. Do you need to send 404 or OK? Did you say OK? Then you're correct, right? So remember always, You should never send 404 for these kind of scenarios. Okay, imagine you're trying to do a search against a database. Search means like a query search. Query is, according to the query, data is not there. It's not like data itself is not there. Those kind of scenarios and these kind of scenarios, like the one that you're watching right now, you don't need to send 404 and it's not valid. The valid result is always 200 OK. The returned item may contain value or it may contain an empty array. In this case, if at all table doesn't have any record, you'll see empty array, but obviously our table has records, so you will never see an empty array. So those two methods are good. If you run this, you should definitely see a good Swagger UI, which is reading the controller methods and it is giving us this kind of an option where you can execute. It will come here. Let's step by step inside. F11, it's going inside. Let it go. You see this? It's going and then it is not having data here. I'm going to hover and show you. Look at this. The method is in the execution state. It is not executed yet. Okay, that's why this is very important. Asynchronous are very, very powerful. So here also, because of the await, data was executed, and then you got the data for a particular ID, and then we are converting this data. And I'll show you one more thing. Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing, right? See, this is the the execution output. It is giving you the query that got executed, and you see this parameter is not having any value. At the rate parameter 0 is equal to question mark. I'll show you how you can see this kind of parameter values here. They are called sensitive data. Hold for a second, I will show you. Now let's got the data. Interesting. So we were able to debug it, and if I minimize this and execute this, this also should get data. See, all of this data came in milliseconds. Okay, now I'm gonna show you like, let's say we do with a number which is not present. So right now we're trying to handle, we did not handle null, that's why we got exception. This is absolutely fine, right? That's when you learn it. Now what you are supposed to do is, basically if the data is null here, we should not process this. So we will do if data equal to null, return null or return this. Okay, because the return type is task of course category model of question mark, which means a nullable value. Now it returned null. We are checking null, true. We return status code called 404. See, great, right? So this is what the get endpoints, and you can see the queries are coming up here. I'll show you how you can see the sensitive information. Now let's go to program where you configured the database in the previous episode. Go there and there is an option called enable sensitive data for logging. See, I will tell you why this is useful and when you should use. As we build, right, we will be writing some LINQ queries. We assume that the query is correct, but if you want to check what entity framework is generating the equivalent SQL query, if you enable what I'm going to show you now, that will show the queries plus the parameters that was sent. This will help you to troubleshoot any issue related to the queries, and this is sensitive information. Remember, do not enable this in production, not just for yourself, even when you're working in a company. Never enable this in production. This is only for testing. See, it is clearly written in the documentation. It's only for testing and debugging, not for the production purpose. So enable sensitive logging will log those things. So let's take a look. What does that mean? I'm passing some value, right? The value was never shown before, you remember? Now let's see what happens. You see, number 3 was sent in parameters, which was hidden earlier, but now you can see that is what was substituted in the var class. That's very helpful, right? Let me know in the comment section how helpful it was, all of these tips. Okay, let's continue. I'm going to disable it. Okay, alright, so next one is we are going to build something called course related. Course is a big entity actually, right? So we're going to build some course related endpoints. So first thing is I will create a model class called course model, and I'm going to explain you what I'm going to do. Like basically, I'm going to copy paste a model which I already built and explain you why I want all of those models. How is our endpoint is going to use it, because eventually these endpoints will be used in the next episode from the UI. I'll show you a beautiful UI. We need to have a solid and good response model. Okay, so that's why we need to build the course model first. We cannot return the entities directly. Okay, so I'm going to replace the course model. If you see, course model will have the course ID, title, description, price, course type, all of those things, right? And then at the end, I also have two more class called category. So basically, whenever I send a list of course details to the UI, I wanted to also tell what kind of categories they belong to. That's why I created a class called course category model, like the previous endpoint model, which will tell about the category of a particular course. And then I also want to send user rating model. User rating model means it's basically another model which I will copy paste now. This is to for each course, what is the user rating? Like for example, if 100 users have rated a particular course, I want to know that 100 users rated and what is the average rating given by the user, right? If you go to Amazon, it shows, right, okay, 4.7 rating star, and then it shows 2000, which means 2000 people rated it and average was to 4.7. Exactly same. So user rating model will be mapped to a particular course. We will see how to retrieve this information, but this will hold the average rating from the user, and then total rating will be the number of users who rated a particular course. Remember, course can be rated only by the people who take the course or enroll the course. Those kind of logic we will implement later, right? So this one, to first fetch the data, we're still dealing with only one part of the code operation, which is just the read operation. We will deal with like the create, insert, like create, update and delete later as the course is progressing. Okay, so now I want to build a course detail. Like I need a separate model where after they select a particular course, I wanted to show more information of a course. Like one course, for example, Angular full stack development might have 10 videos. So 10 videos are nothing but 10 sessions. I want to capture those information. We already have the table called session, course session table and all, but I'm going to build a table, like a model called course detail model, which will inherit the course model, which means I'm not duplicating the code. We are reusing the model. The moment you have inheritance, all of these properties which is inside the course model will automatically come for course detail model also. That's what called inheritance. I hope you know this inheritance concept in C#. It's a fundamental hooks concept. Okay, now I have two more models, user review model and session detail model. User review model means we are bringing up all users, like each user who rated a particular course. We need to capture those information so that we can show, okay, this person named, commented this, reviewed on this date, so and so. And then the second one, session detail models are nothing but, as I said, a course can have one or more sessions. Those informations are going to be treated there. Okay, and so I'm going to put that here, those two properties. So which means course detail model will have reviews, session details along with course model complete models, because it is having an inheritance. This is how you reuse the code. Now we have set up the model that we are going to deal with the controller. Okay, now we will deal with the repository from the first. So we will build repository followed by servers followed by the controllers. So I have a repository called public, you know, now I have a repository called iCourse repository, which is an interface. And in this interface, I have two methods. One is get all the course, as well as we also have sending a parameter called category ID. So we can filter the courses based on the category ID. The second method is I send a particular course ID, get me every single information from a particular course ID. Okay, so now let's build the implementation class. Okay, so I'm gonna use a separate class, but always you use a separate class. Okay, so this time public class a course repository which is inheriting the iCourse repository. Now if you do a control period, it will help you to bring up the implementation like this. And then here again, as usual, we need to inject a like DB context. So first CTOR, put a tab, it will create the constructor. This is a shortcut for the constructor. Now online course DB context, we will give it a name, control period, inject it. It's a property injection. Now we are going to see the first one, the get all course async. Okay, so that method second time I'll show you because of a reason. But let's fill the course details. Okay, this is a simple straightforward one. So now we're dealing with the entity framework core. Okay, there are a lot of features. As long as our tables are structured properly, like you remember that parent-child relationship, foreign key, primary key, all of those things, so it will be very helpful. I'll show you why. So dbcontext.courses, great, the table. Now there's something called include. If you say dot include, that's the extension method of this entity framework core. Basically, if a table has a child table, you can use include and get the information for that table as well. So what this include is doing, this means it is pulling up the associated records of a given course from the category table. That's what it means. Okay, so remember like this, I'm gonna add the information here. Okay, so dot include, you can include the table if they are related to each other, and this will come only when your definitions are correct. Like for example, you have a table whose primary key is a foreign key in another table, which means you can pull up the records if it is present in the child table. Okay, that is what this primary key foreign key thing that we discussed in the DB design. If you have not seen it, feel free to go and watch the DB design, why we need that. Now what I'm going to do is, you see this under the course model, right? Let's go to course entity, like the table literally. If you scroll down, you'll see category, enrollments, instructor, reviews, all of these things, right? All of these things are basically child table. For a given course, these tables are child table which will have some information to it, may or may not. But for example, if user is there, reviewed it, it will be there in the review table. So I'm going to copy paste two more tables, dot include, get the category, dot include reviews, get me all the reviews from the review table for a given course. Like if a course has review, pull up that record. If it is not having, don't pull up, something like that. Okay, similarly, if a course has a session, pull up all the sessions for that course. The entity framework knows how to do a inner join and pull up the records. Now we will apply the where class. Okay, dot where, and this is lambda expression. Lambda expression, we say, hey, course ID equal to the incoming course ID. Okay, then here comes the thing. We need to send a model here. See, course detail model is the model that we are exposing to the controller. If you remember the previous repository, we sent the entity class in the service layer. We defined it, we changed it. The reason why we are doing this here itself is, here only we are writing the query, right? When you're writing the query, it is easy to convert into your required object model. Okay, instead of sending multiple different sets of data to the service layer, and then you do this, like, you know, after that doing this kind of a work, instead of doing that, you can do this right from here. Okay, so that will be very helpful. So we are saying dot select, we need a new course detail model, and then you start typing the property name which is there in the model. See, course ID. Okay, so course ID is equal to, from where we have to find, we need to find from c.course ID. Similarly, title and all the other properties. So I'm going to, you know, copy paste the properties to save some time, and they're basically property matching. You see this? I pulled up all of these things. What I need to pull up is category. So category is new course category model, and then you are now going to assign a value to the category ID. See, c dot category ID. C.category is a table. Under the C, there's a table which we pulled up. Remember, line number 52 is not possible. C.category will not come if you do not have line number 32. 32 and 53, 52 are very important. The dot category can come only when you include a table. Okay, you can try that out. Similarly, we are going to pull up the other informations also. Okay, so the other information here, basically what we want is the reviews. Reviews is C dot reviews. Again, review is pulled up, that's why the table is coming. And so C dot review dot select. Okay, so what is wrong? Let's see, this is a to list, that's why it is giving you error. So dot to list will solve the problem. Okay, so basically we are saying c.review.select and then to the required model where we assign the course ID, display name, rating and all of those things, right? So we were able to do that. Or dot users or display, all of these things are coming. Great. Now if I wanted to order this by descending order where the highest ratings are coming, you can use the inbuilt method called order by descending, and you can pass under which you need to make a descending order. And not only that, I need to take only the latest 10 after I order it. That's why dot take of 10 is coming. Okay, so basically we're taking the top 10 after we do a order by descending and then converting into the to list. Because for a given course, if I have 5,000 reviews, I don't want to take all the 5,000 reviews. I take only the 10 top reviews. Okay, you can adjust this logic according to your need. But the next is the user rating. User rating, if you see, user rating involves the review table, so we are going to write that. At the moment, what I'm trying to just give a comment, like you can also order by the session details, so that the videos are coming, like the sessions are in order, right? You cannot go and read episode 9 without reading episode 8. So just wanted to order it. And similarly, course review is done, so this model is returning all of these stuffs. And all of line number 32, 33, 34, they're all like tables that you need to include so that all the associated records are also taken and out. And finally, we are able to send whatever we wanted to send. Now we put an a void keyword, async keyword, and you can return an asynchronous one. See, I'm returning the data itself here. Okay, great. So this is simple. Now, alright, so next is if we have to get all the courses of whatever we did down, but based on the category ID. See, now there is a possibility that you can get all the course without applying the category ID or applying the category ID. In order to make the methods reusable, or like we can have something called dynamic queries in entity framework. So if you look at this, query is equal to dbcontext.courses.includes category, and then I'm converting this as queryable. As queryable means it is just a query, and this is called deferred execution, which means it is not executed. We are building up the query as we write. The queries are not completed, it's not executed, they are dynamically applied. As queryable means it becomes a query. On top of this, you can continue to build the query. Next, what I'm going to do is, if the incoming category has value, then only I will apply the filter. If not, I will not apply the filter. So which means this method can be used for two purposes, where I wanted to get all the courses. At the same time, I want to get the courses for a particular category ID. Okay, so this is a deferred query. Just remember, link queue, in link queue, if you don't use dot to list dot anything that is converting as a primitive, concrete primitive type, until that is done, they're all deferred execution. In link queue, that's a concept called deferred execution, which means it is going to execute, it is never executed. Okay, it will execute only when it needs to execute. Remember this deferred execution. Now let's apply a filter. If the incoming category ID has value, because it's nullable, see, int of question mark I've put in line number 20. If it has value, we will apply a filter for the category ID. So now query is equal to query.var category ID is equal to category ID, which means now the query is replaced by the new query. Okay, line number 31 query will be replaced with the new query if it executes. So where the conditions are applied. If the incoming category is null, like you don't want to pass anything, this line number 31 is not executed. Okay, we close to the closing of this video. So the next one is I copy paste the same thing, and whatever you saw in the detail is what I'm doing it here. I'm going to build the course model. This is the smaller one compared to the detail model, right? It's exactly same. So once you have it, you return the list of course model. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, we saw how we will build a similar services, right, where the service will call the repository. So I'm going to copy paste the service here. So I copy pasted the iCourse service here, and it has exactly two methods, which is intent calling the repository. Here we did not do any business logic. It's like a relay. We hand over and take over, right? We take it and then we receive the data and return the data. Now again, two more repository and services come, so which means you need to add that in the DI configuration, the dependency injection configuration, which is here. So I copy pasted the dependency injection configuration, right? So I did that. Like we have 4 things here, like 2 repositories, 2 services. We have it here. Good. Next is the controller. I'm going to copy paste the controller as well. It's also exactly same, right? As long as you understand the first one. So we have a course controller. We have 3 methods. One is the get method, which is returning all the courses, right? The second one is, you can see it is the route is line number 29, right? We have the first one is basically to get all the courses. There is no restriction, no category is sent. The second one is basically we are saying, hey, /category course /category ID. This category ID is what will go in the route, and I have written something called from route. So it will take it from there, it will send the category ID and get all the courses. The last one is /details /course ID. The moment you send course ID, it's going to take all the course, and if it is null, it's going to send you 404. Okay, so let's see, we received all the courses whichever is in the database, which we will not use it from the UI because it will be too huge, but you should know how to use it. Now if I pass a particular category, okay, like programming is a particular category, web development is a particular category. If I pass something which is not present, good, I got empty one. If I send something which is present, I got the categories, like the courses based on the category. The last one is the course ID. So if I send a particular course ID which is not present, I'm getting 404. If I send something which is present, see, I'm getting the data. So remember the previous courses based on the category ID, of course it has to be an empty result. So alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is the end of this video, and in the next video I'll be showing you how we will use this and build this kind of an UI, right? So we're going to call this endpoints from our Angular app and see how nicely we can build the UI. If you have not subscribed to my channel, subscribe to my channel. Continue to watch this series. It'll be interesting and useful, and you can become a full stack developer. And if you have any questions, do let me know in the comment section. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more tech tutorials. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to get notified when we post new videos. If you have any questions or suggestions, leave them in the comments below. Happy coding!